Kathy is our Mexican correspondent, or Mexico
Yes.
correspondent.
All right.
She's down there, and I only call her when I need something from Mexico.
Yes.
Nice.
What do you got
Very
for me
nice.
today?
Tequila. You know, what do they have in Mexico? I have a friend visiting in about a month, and she doesn't drink much. So she's like, can I send some non-alcoholic tequila to Mexico, you know, via Prime to your place? I go, I don't know if that'd work, you know? And so I said, I'll look around, see if they have any here. I've been laughed out of more places than you can possibly imagine. Hi. Got any non-alcoholic tequila?
Right.
It always looks like you have a green screen there, Kathy. It's so bloody beautiful every time you come
Yeah,
up.
it is pretty nice. Yeah. I had to turn it around because my husband said I was making too much noise going the other way. So
I agree. It's
Yeah.
good to see you, Len. It's been a long time.
It has. It has.
You haven't changed one.
Life goes fast, and I think especially COVID. You know, there are a lot of people I just haven't seen in forever. Feels like it's weird. Kind of get into these modes of isolation. So
it looks like you have a broadcast microphone in front of
you. I do.
You have a studio at home, right? So that's cool.
I have a kind of a mock music room in the basement.
Oh, nice.
But that's the other thing during the pandemic is we had to kind of figure out a way to actually do television from home, which was interesting. I think it works, but you know, we had to find a way to make everything look good. It's funny, the first year on Marquee, that was my last year with the Cubs. I was in a room and I didn't realize that there was a vacuum in the background. That became kind of a joke that, you know, that I was doing house chores while doing a baseball show on TV. So it was funny.
It could have been worse. It could have been Flushing.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. How is it? You've really just knocked it out of the park for, I'm sorry I even said that, but you know, with your you know, having a dream to be a play-by-play baseball announcer and somehow or other moving on from a Beloit team to, you know, big shot Chicago. I grew up in Chicago too. And so, you know, what a dream career it seems like.
I've been really lucky. I kind of took a circuitous route to get to where I ultimately wanted to be, but I, you know, always wanted to do baseball, and that never kind of left my heart. And I always kind of wanted to do it on radio, and I initially bypassed that by getting into the television game, and I really enjoyed it. But the 12-year-old in me kind of still wanted to be the radio voice of a team. There's just something about baseball on the radio that's very pure. And when I made the switch, I had a lot of people say, you know, radio's dying. And I'm like, radio will last longer than I will.
Yeah.
I'm at that. And if I were 25, I might consider, you know, my options a little bit more, but radio or audio or whatever it's called is never going away, and especially for sports. And I actually think, I don't know how you two operate every day, but by about noon, my eyes are tired from looking at screens. Mm-hmm. And so podcasts, audiobooks, music, I feel like I listen more now than I did when I was a kid. So while terrestrial radio is kind of in a tough spot, I think listening and letting that sense kind of take over, as opposed to feeling like you have to watch something all the time, I don't think that's ever going away. And in fact, I think it's stronger than ever.
It's funny you mentioned that. The last 10 months I've been writing for Barrett News Media, and I talk to talkers all over the country, and it's terrestrial radio in its main thrust. Yeah, we're going to see a change. But to the majority of these people I've spoken to, the intimacy of radio will not die. The intimacy of reaching that listener in the car. And I mean, it's going to subside and podcasts are going to reign. But like Len said, I don't ever see the full demise of it, because it's just the people I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of them, that it's that intimacy that we need. You know, podcasts can provide some of it, but I do think that local radio, and in this case, sports, will survive. That's my.
Yeah, and the other thing is we have access to everything now. I remember being a kid, especially with sports, every game wasn't on.
Right.
And so when there was a game on television, it was a very special event, the game of the week, what have you. Now it's everywhere. And I think because everything is so accessible and so available, that literally our senses are overloaded.
Yeah.
And so that theater of the mind thing, where you don't have to literally pay attention and look at a screen, but just have your headphones on or a speaker or in the car and hear a voice.
Yeah.
I think you hit on it, Jim, that intimate part of it, and just kind of letting your mind wander or whatever, or get into the story, is, I think, very special.
Kathy, where are you at with what you listen to these days?
Oh, as far as radio and yeah, you know, I'm still such a news junkie. I'm constantly switching. And here in Mexico, I rely on satellite radio, and so it's kind of fascinating. And also, I don't want to say her name; she's going to talk back to me. But I love to sort of sample radio stations around the country, because you can do that now with Alexa. You can say, I want to listen to, you know, such and such and such, you know, not the sports stuff. I mean, I'm kind of stuck watching it on television, just because so many radio stations seem to block. I don't know that that's true of what's going on in Chicago, but I can't listen to like a Brewers game on the radio.
Right.
Maybe on an app I can do it. And maybe I'm just not technically, you know, sophisticated enough to figure out how to do it. But I agree. I started in radio, and I think if I ever were to find a way back to broadcasting, that's where I'd want to be, because it's just, it's not easy. I mean, a lot of people, even, you know, you think about it, doesn't everybody always think somebody's written everything for you, and somehow or other they're feeding you this information, and you're just spouting it out, that you're not really telling a story on your own? But radio gives you that opportunity, and that is an awesome experience.
But the prep is immense, and the people I've spoken to, they spend 4 hours a day prepping for something that sounds extemporaneous, and they get away from television into radio because they don't have to have that 6-minute bit, or they don't have to get out that quickly. So I find I've spoken to 20 people that have gone from television in major markets to radio for that sheer purpose of being able to, like Jim Avila I talked to, and he just can speak his mind now. And I think that that's got to be freeing, Len. I know you can't speak your mind in that talk format, but you know, how much can you interject yourself into a game?
Yeah, that, for me, that's not as big an issue because of the job I have. It's very similar. There's much more description of what's happening on radio than on television. But I will say this, and I've often compared the two, because I get asked a lot. For me, it's a lot like tennis. It's singles versus doubles. And ostensibly it's the same sport, but the strategies are incredibly different. Right. And in some ways, television is doubles, it's triples, quadruples. It's 27 to 30 people involved. It's a team effort. And when you pull together something with a great replay or a shot in the crowd that becomes viral or whatever, that is really satisfying. But there's also something about, in a way, the isolation of radio. It's you and your partner, nobody in your ear, and the landscape is completely blank in the canvas. You can do whatever you want, and nothing happens until you say it happens. And for somebody who does what I do, there's an art form to both. I think there are more choices on television doing a game, just because you're not describing everything in terms of what to talk about next. Whereas on radio, you kind of fall back to where's the ball, what's the count, what's the score. So they're very different, and they challenge different parts of the brain. And I've enjoyed both very much.
I've heard some advice you gave someone that said, you had said, on television, don't feel the need to fill every space.
Right.
And in the radio, you tend to have to paint a little more regularly. And my theory, we've never talked about this, Len, but my instinct on why you went to radio is to feel, in my estimation, you can feel a little more entrenched in the team, more embedded in the team. Is that wrong? I mean, because,
No, that's right. We do every game on radio. Television, we get knocked off for
right.
national
That was my
broadcast.
take, is that knowing you, it wasn't enough anymore. That,
Yeah.
you think you're at the pinnacle of success with that gig, but at the same time, you are literally part of the fabric of that team now. And that was my theory on why you did it, even though you and I never talked about it.
Yeah, that's part of it. Look, I have 2 World Series rings, one from 2003 with the Florida Marlins, and then 2016 with the Cubs. And while I was with the team during the postseason, I didn't get to call the games because there is no local television. And I tell this story a lot. When I left the Cubs to go to the White Sox, David Ross, the Cubs manager, called me, and he was happy for me, but he was upset I was leaving. And I said, well, let's go back to 2016 when you were catching for the Cubs, and we're in September, and Joe Madden, the manager, brings you into his office and says, Rossi, you've had a great year, an unbelievable career. You're the heart and soul of this team. Everybody loves having you around, but we have 25 men on our roster, and I need another left-hander in the bullpen. So I'm going to go with Miguel Montero and Wilson Contreras. They're going to be our catchers. You are not going to be on the roster for the playoffs. You will travel with us, but I need that roster spot. How would that have made you feel? And he said, I would have been crushed. Yep. I said, well, that's how I feel. That's how I said, that's a little bit how I feel every time we make the playoffs. And he said,
my instincts were right on then.
Yeah, he said, I never even thought about that. I said, we're there all year, and then the biggest moments were kind of brushed to the side. That's just the way the business is. Yeah. And so that's another reason why radio really appealed to me. And I got to do 4 playoff games last year when the White Sox played the Astros in the first round. So that was pretty neat.
Well, you're not the first guy to switch from broadcasting the Cubs to the Sox, or the Sox to the Cubs, or whatever. But, growing up in Chicago, you grew up, I think you grew up in Michigan. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who your teams would have been. The Tigers.
The Tigers. Yeah. Ernie Harwell was my guy.
Sure. But I mean, I was a North Shore kid. And if you said White Sox, people would look at you like, what's wrong with you? We're Cubs fans here. There's a divide here. It's like sort of it's the political divide before there ever was a political divide. And so I don't even know if there was is there any kind of grumble when you switch sides, or what goes on?
Oh yeah. I got a lot of Twitter hate. A lot of people were very angry. I really did internalize it as they were people who liked my work. So I understood that they felt, in a way that I was.
You were a traitor or something.
Well, yeah, I heard traitor a lot, but I guess they felt that I wasn't as loyal as they thought I was. But this is a business, and I didn't leave the Cubs because I didn't like the Cubs or my job. I loved what I was doing. I just had turned 50, and I said to myself, what? And this was during the pandemic, so that's the other part of this. I had a lot of time to reflect on my life and career, and I didn't have to move, stay in the same house. Radio is something I'd never done full-time in the big leagues. I have a World Series ring from the Cubs. I did 16 seasons, which was how many years Harry Carey did with the Cubs.
Yep.
My parents are not getting any younger. They live in Michigan. White Sox play in Detroit 2 or 3 times a year. I mentioned, the postseason stuff. So there were like 5 or 6 things that really appealed to me that I hadn't kind of checked off. And I thought, well, it's now or never. If I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it probably down the road. So, too often, and Kathy, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. As great as these jobs are, and you had one of those jobs.
Yeah, I had a great one.
There are people in your life and maybe in your circle who assume, well, she's just going to do this for the next 40 years, or Len's going to be the voice of the Cubs for 40 years. And they say that to you over and over again, and it's flattering to hear. But there is a point where you have to really check that and say, what do you want?
Right. Because
And
you could
ultimately
just sort
it's
of
your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I retired in 2018. So right before November of 2018, couldn't have been more timely if you talk about the pandemic crashing in on everything.
Right.
And I decided, I mean, I'm in my 60s. I'm almost 70. So, it was time to really start thinking about maybe I'm not going to do this every day. Because it's a very, very grueling business. It's as many people as would say, oh, you're going to be there forever. They'd be like, isn't it time for you to take leave or whatever? I mean,
Right.
You could hear, it was always so nuanced. And I always took it as, oh yes, you guys like me so much, you just want me to be happy and retired at some point. Right. But I was really happy with what I was doing, and I just wanted to try something else. Now, it's a difference in age. I sort of became a snowbird, but I'm not completely in that category because I'm treating my retirement now as sort of graduate school. I'm taking a language, I'm immersing myself in other cultures, and it's kind of fascinating. I sort of was deciding between spending my winters in Madison or Mexico, like I could take courses or whatever in college because I wanted to switch gears. And I think we're lucky enough to have done that. And I love hearing your story, because when were you going to do it if you weren't going to do it at that point?
Yeah, the lesson, I guess, is to wrap up my long-winded point, Jim, is nobody is going to steer you to what your heart wants. You have to be the person who does it. And generally, people in my position don't go, well, what else could I do here? They just go, oh, you're the voice of the Cubs. Why would you ever look to leave? And I heard from a lot of really successful, famous people in baseball and in broadcasting who called me after and said, I really appreciate that you did what your heart told you, and you didn't just sit there and say, well, if I leave, people are going to say you're crazy. I don't really care if people think I'm crazy.
Right. Well, right. And I mean, and then everybody, there's like, well, I got fired, she got fired. And none of that stuff is true. It's so hard for people to sometimes believe that you just follow your heart and your path that you think is going to be fun for you. And also challenging. I think you walked into a tougher position, actually, telling the story of baseball on radio. Yeah, I mean, television was a learning curve for me, because I switched from radio to television, and suddenly I had to play doubles or triples, like you say.
Yeah.
When you were a one-person show, it was pretty amazing what you could just kind of conjure up. And I, to this day, believe that everything I learned in radio helped me immensely when I got into television, because I thought I didn't have to just see a cow, say a cow, as they used to say a lot. You're supposed to say, I could see a cow and explain something about the cow other than, it didn't have to be so elementary. You could add a new layer, and that was fun.
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised by your switch, Len. Like I said, I didn't know until I read it somewhere, but I wasn't surprised. But there's one thing I want to ask you. With Daniel Day-Lewis and Phantom Thread, why did you not like it?
Whoa.
Because I've questioned your taste in film ever since.
I don't remember it.
There's a curveball.
I remember it.
I don't.
All right, I'll switch one more gear. When Better Call Saul ended, you know how much I love that show.
Yes, I haven't watched the last season. It's still.
I won't give you.
Yeah,
I will say one thing. I'm going to say one thing, that they handled the ending remarkably. That's all I'll say, is that Sopranos kind of sucked, Ozark kind of sucked, but I can tell you that these two guys, Gilligan and the other guy, wow, they nailed it, and look forward to that, because I'm walking away saying Breaking Bad's ending was rather lame for me, but this one, and it's always been a cerebral show, And
Yes.
you either love it or you don't. So what are you watching these days?
What about Brockmire? Did you watch that show?
Oh yeah.
You know, I will tell you about Brockmire. Everybody loved it. It felt too on the nose because of what I do. And
Yeah.
I think as Hank Azaria, right?
Yes.
He's awesome.
Amazing. What a talent.
He's amazing. But I kind of felt like I was just watching a bit baseball. I was just watching kind of my life, but then an exaggerated version of that. So I think I was just too close to it to really love it. Yeah. But I know there are a lot of people who adore
I think it plateaued. I think that, you get to a point in the show where like, where are they going to go with this? How many more times can we see this absurdist kind of guy?
Yeah.
And there's only a handful of shows, Saul was, to me, and I know it's impossible for anybody else to say, but it was the best show ever on television. I know it's really hard to say that to anything. And movies, I can't break it down less than 25. But you ever watch a show where you're like, where the hell are they going to go with this? Like there was a show recently, and I watched it, like,
For me, the Wire was the greatest.
Yeah, but Yellowstone has jumped the shark as far as I'm concerned.
I watched the first season. I haven't followed up.
I like Succession.
Succession's
I don't have
excellent.
Yeah.
But
Excellent.
1883, I highly recommend. It's better than Yellowstone. The
Okay.
precursor to that. And now they got the new one with Harrison Ford. I wouldn't watch Harrison Ford if he were in my living room. I think he's got a range from A to B. And I just, it's Han Solo. The guy won the lottery when he got another job after that. And I mean, there's so many people today, you're like, how the hell do they last?
How do you really feel?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You know me, I'm so shy. I don't express my. I gotta tell you one thing, Kathy. Len Kasper once said to me, Jim, I wish I could say half the things you
Oh, that's
because I got nothing to lose. He's got everything to lose. And I say, do you remember the Cal Ripken thing, Len, in the press box at Wrigley when he came out of the pisser? And
yeah. You told me. Yeah.
you were there.
Yeah.
You were 2 feet away from me.
Yeah, you don't care.
It's called
I like that.
ADHD. It's called attention deficit. It's called I don't give a shit. Because I got nothing to lose. But Kathy, have you ever been in a situation where you really wanted to say something to somebody, but you're
yeah. Oh,
all the time.
yeah. I had a kind of a silly situation in which I was filling in for the noon show at Channel 12 before I was ever an anchor. And I was really nervous about it because anchoring was like, whoa, this is a big deal. And they told me that I had a guy who was part of the Dale Carnegie operation going to be on set to talk about some sort of a conference they were going to have. And they told me that Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders was going to be on the show. And, I'm of that era that I'm like, Mark Lindsay's going to be on my, I have to talk to Mark Lindsay on television. I mean, Dale Carnegie, no slouch either, but it wasn't him, but it was, somebody from, so we were running out of time on the newscast, and this Dale Carnegie guy was just going on and on and on. And I looked at him and I said, this is all very interesting, but please put up the screen that tells when this event is, because we've got Mark Lindsay in the wings, and I need to talk to Mark Lindsay because I loved Mark Lindsay when I was in high school. And this guy just looks at me like, what? But we were going to run out of time. I was going to have enough time talking to Mark Lindsay, so that's a pretty tame one. And there were obviously other more, other situations, but that was, and my producer was like, I can't believe you did that to that guy. I said, well, he's a little long-winded. Let's go,
Yeah, Carnegie, give me a break. Lenny, you had a fortunate situation to interview, so many quote unquote celebrities. Did you have one interview that stood out after all this time? I know there were so many, but
there are a million. Eric Estrada kind of went off the rails. He was a really sweet guy, but we're about.
What the hell was he doing in the booth? Were they rebooting Chips for the 50th anniversary?
No, he was on. He was on one of the reality shows. I don't know which one. But it was a crazy group of, I think Ron Jeremy might have been somebody in the house. It was weird. So we're doing a baseball game, And Eric Estrada starts talking about a campaign he's on against child pornography on the internet.
Ah,
And at one point, and you can Google it, you'll find it. He literally says, "Now I've seen my fair share of child porn, dot, dot, dot."
oh my,
It
oh
was kind of
my.
an unfortunate phrase to say the least. And so like at that point, I'm like, well, here's the 2-2 pitch. I mean, there's nowhere to go.
Right,
And the producers in my ear going, what did he just say?
exactly.
And people are on Twitter going crazy. And so like those get a little unwieldy.
Yeah, I had kind of a really weird thing that it was a bounce too. It was, I did a story on Jackie Robinson Day at Miller Park. No, it was at County Stadium. And it was a new deal that they were just starting to do this. And ABC used to call us every day and ask us what was going on in the, at the television station. And Nightline would call and say, what are you guys up to? What are you doing? So my assignment guy says, oh, we got this reporter who's, just determined to do a story about Jackie Robinson. I thought it was a great idea to do Jackie Robinson Day, kind of compare where the playing field, the upper management, kind of ahead of my time in this little story that I was doing. And so Nightline said, we like it. We're gonna do this subject for our show tonight. So I'm kind of all excited. I know I'm going to see some of my video or something on Nightline. They get Al Campanis on the air, and Ted Koppel is interviewing Al. This is why Al Campanis. This is the backside of this story.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
because I did this story. So Al Campanis is on. I'm watching this show. I'm so and then you're watching going, oh, this is going down the drain.
Yeah.
Campanis just says something like, to the effect of, well, there aren't people in upper management because that's just not the skill set, or, it was just more crude than that. And Ted Koppel, I watched this and I thought, God, I'm not sure I know how to handle it. I thought Ted Koppel, he said, look, we're going to regroup here in essence, and we're coming back. And I want you to think about what you're saying, Al, or Mr. Campanis, or however. And they came back and he said the same exact thing.
Yep.
And I kind of walked into work the next day thinking, I inadvertently set off, an historic moment in one day. I suppose those views would have come out, but I don't know. I mean, it was just because some, that was just excruciating to watch. And it was interesting to dissect as how you would approach that if you were in a position of interviewing somebody like that.
Did your segment air before or after Campanis was
My
on?
segment aired before.
Before, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea that. Okay. So like 1987?
Yeah.
88?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, Campanis was out. It changed. It didn't. I don't know that it made any much of a ripple effect as far as the industry is concerned, but it certainly was kind of like, and a Nightline was like, what's that reporter doing today? I mean, because they loved it. I mean, it put them in the headline. That's interesting too, because it does put you in the headlines. You do get in the middle of the story. I didn't, so much as Ted Koppel, obviously, but it was amazing to think about how something you had a hand in turned out to be so much bigger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did Estrada try to fix it?
No, no. I mean, no. When you're doing a game, especially they're on for 6 minutes, it's just,
right.
He probably after the fact realized, what did I say? Yeah. Jeff Gordon, we had another one where he called it Wrigley Stadium. He was totally out of.
Oh no.
He had no idea how big the 7th inning stretch was for the Cubs, but he was a very sweet guy.
Yeah.
And he got absolutely murdered in the press, especially racing fans after. And I felt really bad for him. He just, he or his people didn't tell him beforehand, this is a big deal and here's why. He kind of treated it like it was no big deal. And so I felt bad for him. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but Kathy, the one thing I wanted to mention today for sure is one of your colleagues is someone who got me started at Marquette. Nick Bohr was the sports director or news director at the student station as a senior at Marquette when I was a freshman. And as a freshman, I wasn't supposed to basically do anything. I had to pay my dues to get on the air. from day one, Nick was like, "You're qualified to be on the air, and you're going to do Marquette basketball with us." And he's a lifelong friend. I remember when he went to WISN from Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, and he was trying to figure out kind of how it was all going to work. And he's still there to this day. And I know you love him.
He's wonderful.
Just an awesome guy.
That's great.
I love watching him and his kids grow up, and you know, he's such a solid, that solid people who really go after a story are always going to have hopefully jobs in this business.
That's right.
Final question for you, Len. When people think of Len Kasper, they think of baseball. We lost Bobby Hull yesterday. You have an interest across the board, right? I know you should do Packer stuff, but tell people, are there other sports that you feel as much as baseball, or is just baseball head and shoulders above everything else?
I actually, I watch NHL games a lot. It's the one sport I never covered officially. I do like football. If a basketball game is on, I'll watch it, but I don't go out of my way to watch it. I generally tend to stay away from sports, and I don't watch a lot of baseball because I end up broadcasting about 200 games a year. So music, movies, books, I try to get out for a long run every day. I really try to unplug as much as I can. And I think my mental health is really important, and kind of resetting every day and making sure that when I wake up and I go to work that I'm excited about it is really important. Because the other thing you two also know is, you work with some people who have really good gigs and they just don't seem like they like it. And I don't ever want to be that person. When I'm at the ballpark, I'm happy to be there. I don't care if the game doesn't matter in the standings. If the weather's bad, I'm always fortunate to be able to do it. And that's something I pride myself on.
Yep. Well, thank you, Len. I appreciate you coming on here.
Happy to do it. And looks like Kathy's going to win the weather battle. It is sunny here in Chicago, but it's about 20 degrees.
Is it even that high? Seriously? I thought, I went out this morning and I thought 10 degrees maybe, but yeah, Kathy, we officially hate your guts. So
thanks.
Thanks so much.
You look and sound great, Kathy. Jim, same to you, and appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, there's going to be people that see this, so we're excited. Look at this. We'll have 18 more fans.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye, Lenny.